I'm Don Tinney, a high school English teacher in South Hero, Vermont, currently serving as your Vermont-NEA President. And I'm here today with Brenda Siegel, who is running for Lieutenant Governor. To get us started today, Brenda, I'd like to welcome you and ask you an opening question of why are you running for Lieutenant Governor?
Thank you for having me, Don. And I decided to run for Lieutenant Governor because I see an incredible opportunity inside that office to work with communities on the ground, especially people who are often unheard or unlistened to if they are able to use their voice, and both work with them on what they need to do in order to engage in our electorate, engage in our democracy, and to have the opportunity to really bring those voices forward, to be able to step back from the podium and allow those voices and those stories that need to be heard so much more than mine be at the center of our conversations around policy and just in general our systems across the state. So I think that there's real excitement. We are able to do things like State House 101 and teach people how to engage both inside the State House, in their communities, and in a virtual manner, especially if we're going to end up still doing virtual work. And I see one of the most hard parts about our democracy right now is that we don't have the engagement we need. And I think a lot of that is because people who we do need to hear from don't really have the bandwidth to continue to do that work. So I think there's this opportunity in that seat to really learn how to build the movement on the ground and to engage the electorate.
Thank you. And moving right to a very current topic, I'd like to hear your views on the reopening of our schools.
So I'm not happy with the way that it was rolled out. I think that there was not enough engagement from educators on what they're going to need in order to be successful. In addition, I don't think that there is a proposal for more funding, or not a good proposal for more funding to be able to handle some of the problems that will arise from reopening in the way that we are. In addition to that, we right now have an opportunity to really build better in our school system, to solve some of the problems that currently exist in our schools around hunger, around people who are experiencing homelessness, around kids who don't have access to broadband, and general inequity in our schools around racial justice and other marginalized issues, including how we're addressing people with disabilities. And I think that if we don't harness this moment right now when we have this opportunity, then we aren't going to be successful at solving those problems or meeting the challenge. And I know personally from having experienced a lot of crisis and also from being an educator in our schools that you have to meet the challenge where it is. And right now we have created this reopening and an expectation that our kids are going to go back to normal when that's not the reality at all. Our kids are going to go to a very different setting where even though they're together, they'll feel alone. And because they won't be able to engage in the way that they could when they last left school. And that type of social awareness is extremely important for our children. And I know also as a mom who homeschooled my senior, sort of in my in our last few months through his last time in K through 12, I can't give him, even as an educator myself, I can't give him what he would have gotten at school. And so our kids are going to come back and need more, not less. So the constant attacks on our education, also our funding for education, are not healthy for what our kids are going to need to feel secure, and our educators are going to need to feel secure when they go back to school.
Thank you. As Lieutenant Governor, how will you address systemic racism and inequity in all of Vermont's institutions?
So as many people know, this has been an issue that I've been fighting for throughout my life. I am glad there is an awakening around George Floyd. However, this issue has been ever present in our state for a long time, with one in 14 Black men ending up in jail in their lifetimes, with us having disproportionately suspending children of color in schools, with disproportionate traffic stops for people of color. And so if we actually want to solve that, we have to be honest about where we fail as a state and where we fail in our systems. And then we need to look at how we rebuild so that we are, and how we move funding so that the funding that we are using actually works. If we remove school resource officers, for example, and instead have more social workers, instead have more therapists and services around healthcare, then we're gonna do better by our children than if we continue to dig our heels in on systems that have always were built to be racist in the first place. And so the first thing that we need to do is, as white people, we need to reflect on our own bias. We need to talk to our immediate circles surrounding us. And then we need to go into those systems with wanting to change them, not incrementally, but change them to move away from the scourge of racism and inequity, because that ultimately not only harms people of color, it harms all of us, and it harms our state as a whole. And the only way to get away from that is to actually do the deep dive that we need to allow people of color to let us know what we need, and for us as white people to do the work.
Thank you. So in wrapping up our conversation today, I would like you to offer any final thoughts you have for our members.
So I've been really distressed as I've watched over the last 4 years attacks on our NEA union, on our unions in general, actually across the state, but on the NEA, especially as it surrounds healthcare. I want to see us to really work on a universal healthcare system, and I would like to see us change the way that we talk about school funding. So I believe that our schools need to be funded cradle to grave. I don't think it does us any good to separate K through 12 from pre-K from higher ed, because when we do that, I believe it allows people who want to cut our funding to divide parents of preschool kids up from parents of K through 12 kids, from parents of higher ed, and then from homeowners, when in fact, oftentimes those are all the exact same people, and we fall prey to being divided up. And so in fact, my son was once in pre-K, he just finished K through 12, and he will be in college in our state college system next year. And so through all those systems, I would have benefited from having our schools be fully funded. I still would, and our family would. And so when we talk about funding, I'd like us to move from a property tax to an income tax for the residential portion of our property tax, which is a very small portion, and it would end that argument because people would not be worrying legitimately about their pocket. They want to fully fund schools, and that's what we've heard over and over and over again across the state. So when we're talking about funding, I want us to talk about fully funding from cradle to grave. And I want to make sure that when we're talking about healthcare, we remove that conversation by having a universal healthcare system. Because when we remove that conversation, then we take away this, I think, very painful and harmful bargaining chip that we use on educators that ultimately is not good for our entire state. And we also need to start be fully committed to paying our pensions. Because if we don't pay our teacher pensions, then we aren't actually meeting our own goals. And again, we're harming our schools. So that narrative needs to end because our kids are what are going to create going to fix the demographic challenge in this state. Our kids are what's going to make the difference.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here. On behalf of my fellow 13,000 members, I want to thank Brenda Siegel for our conversation today. And we'll see you on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.